Capricorn, pause for a moment. Take a breath. Because if you're here right now, this message didn't find you by accident. For nearly 10 years, you've been carrying a weight no one ever noticed, smiling on the outside, surviving on the inside, holding responsibilities that were never meant to be this heavy. And yet, you kept going. Here's what you need to hear today. The cycle you've been trapped in is ending. The debt you've been paying in silence is finished. If your spirit feels this, type in the comments, "My new life begins now." Because what you're about to hear next will explain why those 10 years happened, and why everything changes from here. I want you to picture this for a moment. Just you and me, no noise, no expectations. Think back over the last 10 years of your life. Not the highlights, not the moments you showed the world, but the quiet parts. The mornings when you woke up already tired, the nights when your body finally rested but your mind refused to. The times you said you were fine because explaining the truth felt heavier than staying silent. You carried responsibilities that didn't come with applause. You carried them because someone had to. Because walking away was never really an option for you. You became the strong one by default. The dependable one. The one people leaned on without ever asking how much weight you were already holding. And you didn't complain. Not because it didn't hurt, but because you knew complaining wouldn't change what needed to be done. There were moments when joy felt like a luxury you couldn't afford. Moments when rest felt undeserved. Moments when you wondered how long one person could keep going like this without breaking. Family needs pulled at you. Financial pressure stayed close to your chest. Unspoken expectations followed you into every room. No one ever sat you down and said, "This is too much. Let me take some of this from you." So, you did what Capricorn always does. You endured. You learned how to keep moving even when your heart felt heavy. You learned how to stay composed while something inside you slowly wore thin. You learned how to survive seasons that asked more from you than they ever gave back. And here is something no one told you back then. Endurance like that changes a person. It reshapes how you see the world. It sharpens your instincts. It builds a quiet strength that doesn't need to announce itself. But it also leaves marks, invisible ones, the kind you carry alone. If you're listening to this and feeling that familiar ache in your chest, that quiet recognition, that sense of being seen without having to explain yourself, you're not imagining it. This message is speaking directly to that part of you. Because there is a reason you lasted through what should have broken you. There is a reason you stayed standing when the pressure kept increasing. There is a reason you learned to be strong in silence. What you carried wasn't random, it wasn't meaningless, and it was never supposed to last forever. Some burdens exist only to shape the person who can one day put them down. And as you sit here now, listening, breathing, something inside you already knows that the weight you've been holding is beginning to loosen its grip. You may not see it yet. You may not fully trust it. But there is a shift happening beneath the surface. A quiet one. The kind that starts long before the world notices. Stay with me. Because what comes into view next will help you understand why this season felt so long and why it didn't come to an end until now. There is a question you asked yourself more times than you ever admitted out loud. Sometimes in the shower, sometimes driving alone, sometimes late at night, staring at the ceiling. Why does it feel harder for me? Why does it seem like no matter how carefully I do things, the cost is always higher? You replayed moments in your mind, choices you made with good intentions, promises you kept even when it hurt you, paths you stayed on long after others would have walked away. And quietly, you wondered if life was correcting you, if the universe was keeping score, if you were somehow paying for something you couldn't name. Let me say this gently, so gently it can land without resistance. What you lived through was not punishment. It never was. It was a long clearing, a cycle that had an end written into it long before you reached the middle. Some signs carry weight earlier in life, not because they deserve more pain, but because they have the strength to move through it without losing their integrity. Capricorn is built that way. You mature early. You take responsibility before you're ready. You learn restraint before you learn ease. Not because life is cruel, but because your path requires steadiness before reward. There were lessons you couldn't have learned gently, not because you are stubborn, but because your soul is precise. You needed to understand endurance. You needed to understand boundaries. You needed to understand the difference between carrying something out of love and carrying something out of obligation. And so, the cycle kept moving, until the lesson was complete. Not when you begged, not when you were exhausted, but when you were finally shaped enough to release it. That timing matters, because if it had ended sooner, you would have doubted yourself. You would have questioned your worth. You would have given credit to luck instead of strength. What you survived taught you who you are without applause, without validation, without guarantees, and that knowledge stays with you forever. If you listen closely now, you can feel the difference between being tired and being finished. This isn't burnout you're sensing, it's closure. Something old has stopped asking things of you, stopped pulling at you, stopped demanding proof. You don't need to justify what you went through anymore. You don't need to explain why it took so long. The cycle did what it came to do, and as strange as it may sound, there is a quiet respect in the way life steps back once the work is done. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with a subtle easing, a space opening where pressure used to live. If you feel that space, even just a little, stay with it. Because what's beginning to show itself now is not about correction or repayment or endurance. It's about recognition. And that recognition is about to take form in ways that will finally make sense of everything you carried and why you were strong enough to carry it until now. There is something most people never talk about. Not because it isn't real, but because it feels too quiet to explain. Every experience you lived through left a mark somewhere, not just in memory, but in something deeper. You felt it when you were misunderstood and chose not to defend yourself, when your efforts went unseen and you kept showing up anyway, when opportunities slipped away even though you had done everything right. None of that disappeared into nothing. It was all recorded, not in a way meant to trap you, but in a way meant to witness you. Imagine a record that doesn't judge, doesn't rush, doesn't forget, a record that simply holds what you carried, the nights you swallowed words to keep the peace, the times you gave more than you received because walking away felt wrong, the moments you stood quietly while someone else took credit for your work. You didn't protest, you didn't demand balance, you trusted that somehow it would even out. That trust matters more than you know, because balance does come, not loudly, not on your timeline, but precisely when the lesson is complete. There comes a moment when nothing more is required of you. No more proving, no more enduring, no more repeating the same cycle in different forms. That moment is subtle. It feels like an exhale you didn't realize you were holding, like space opening where tension used to sit, like a quiet click deep inside saying, enough has been learned here. You may notice it in small ways first, a sense of closure around something that once hurt, a reaction that no longer rises when it used to, a memory that loses its emotional grip. That is not time dulling the pain. That is resolution. When a cycle finishes, it does not announce itself. It releases you. You are not required to keep paying for old misunderstandings. You are not obligated to carry the weight of what others failed to see. You are not meant to keep reliving moments that already taught you everything they had to teach. What was taken from you was not stolen forever. It was held back until you were ready to receive it differently. And readiness does not come from desire. It comes from depth. You now understand yourself in ways you could not have before. You know your limits. You know your value. You know the difference between sacrifice and self-abandonment. That knowledge closes doors that once kept reopening. If you feel lighter without knowing why, trust that feeling. It is the sign of something being finished properly. Nothing left unfinished pulls at you now. Nothing unpaid waits in the background. Nothing old has permission to follow you forward. There is a quiet dignity in this moment, a sense that life has stood up straight again in your presence. And as you rest into that feeling, just notice what begins to shift inside you. The way your breath deepens, the way your thoughts slow, the way possibility starts to feel less distant. Because once the past no longer asks anything of you, the future finally has room to speak. And when it does, it will sound very different from anything you have heard before. There are moments in life that don't announce themselves with noise. They don't arrive with fireworks or dramatic endings. They arrive softly, almost respectfully. December 19th and 20th carry that kind of energy. You might not circle those days on a calendar. You might not wake up expecting something extraordinary, and yet, something inside you already recognizes them. Because endings do not always feel like loss, sometimes they feel like relief. There is a subtle shift that happens when a long cycle reaches its natural conclusion. Not a collapse, not a breakdown, but a quiet release. You may feel it in your body before you understand it with your mind, a tension easing in your shoulders, a breath coming a little deeper than usual, a sense that you no longer have to brace yourself for what comes next. For years, you moved through life with an invisible pressure beside you, always anticipating the next challenge, always preparing for the next demand, always holding yourself together just in case. That vigilance shaped you. It made you capable. It made you resilient. But it also kept you tight. When a cycle closes properly, the first thing it gives back is clarity. Decisions stop feeling heavy. Choices stop feeling tangled. You begin to know what feels right without needing to explain it. Not because you've become careless, but because the noise has finally quieted. You may notice that certain worries no longer hook into you the way they used to. Questions that once kept you awake now drift past without demanding answers. You stop rehearsing conversations that will never happen. This is not indifference. This is resolution. When life no longer asks you to fight for balance, balance returns on its own. You are allowed to receive now. Not because you earned it through suffering, but because the season that required endurance has completed its work. Receiving feels unfamiliar at first. You may hesitate. You may wonder if it will last. That hesitation is understandable. It comes from living too long in a state of holding. But notice something. The relief you feel is not fragile. It does not disappear when you question it. It stays. That is how you know this. Shift is real. There is also a strange tenderness that comes with this moment, a gentleness toward yourself you may not have felt in years. You begin to see your past not as a series of mistakes, but as a long act of courage. And in that recognition, something unlocks. You realize you no longer have to measure your worth by how much you can carry. You no longer need to prove your strength through silence. You no longer need to live as if stability must always be earned the hard way. This doorway does not force itself open. It waits until you are ready to walk without armor. If you pause long enough, you can feel it. A sense of space ahead of you, not empty. Open, and as you stand there, with less weight on your chest and more light in your thoughts, just notice how naturally your attention begins to turn forward, not with urgency, not with fear, but with a quiet curiosity, because something ahead of you is already responding to who you have become. There is a moment when change stops being an idea and starts becoming something you can feel, not all at once, not dramatically, but in small, undeniable ways that gently rearrange how the world responds to you. You may notice it first in how people meet your eyes, the pause before they speak, the way they listen a little longer than they used to. Not because you demanded respect, not because you explained yourself better, but because something in you no longer asks for permission to exist. You carry yourself differently now, quieter, more settled, and the world senses that. Opportunities begin to show up without the old struggle attached to them, not chased, not forced. They arrive naturally, as if they were always meant to find you once you stopped running. Work feels aligned instead of draining. Money moves with less resistance. Positions of responsibility come without the familiar weight of proving yourself. You are no longer trying to convince life that you are capable. Life already knows. Inside you, something else changes too. The constant inner noise begins to soften. That low hum of worry that used to follow you everywhere starts to fade into the background. You still think deeply, you still care, but you are no longer at war with your own thoughts. Doubt loses its grip, not because you have all the answers, but because you trust yourself to handle whatever comes. Decisions stop feeling like traps. You don't circle them endlessly anymore. You sense what fits, you sense what doesn't. And when you choose, there is peace behind the choice. That clarity is one of the quiet gifts of rebirth. Then there are the people, not many, but the right ones. They arrive without noise, without confusion, without the old patterns attached. Conversation flows easily. Trust builds without effort. There is a feeling of being met where you are instead of being evaluated. These connections do not drain you, they restore you. And perhaps the most important sign of all is something no one else can see. You feel at home inside yourself, not perfect, not finished, but steady. You are no longer defined by what you survived. You are defined by what you understand. You begin to see that rebirth is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to yourself without the weight you were never meant to carry forever. If you're listening and quietly recognizing these shifts, even in the smallest ways, let yourself acknowledge them. They are not coincidence, they are confirmation. And as these signs continue to settle into your life, one by one, almost effortlessly, you may start to sense a deeper question rising within you. Not about what you've lost, not about what you've endured, but about what you are finally free to build now with open hands and an unguarded heart. Stay right here, because that question is about to shape everything that comes next. There comes a moment when growth asks for something different from you, not effort, not endurance, but release. And release can feel unfamiliar when you've spent so many years holding everything together. You learned early to measure your worth by how much you could carry, how much you could fix, how much you could sacrifice without falling apart. That mindset kept you alive. It kept others safe. It gave structure to chaos. But it also quietly taught you something that was never meant to stay true, that you had to earn peace through pain. That rest came only after exhaustion. That love required self-denial. Those ideas settled in slowly. So slowly you may not even notice them anymore. They sound like your own thoughts now. That quiet voice saying you could have done more. That familiar pull to apologize even when you weren't wrong. That hesitation to receive something good without wondering what it will cost later. These patterns are not flaws, they are habits formed in survival. But survival is no longer the assignment. There is a gentle invitation being placed in front of you now. Not a demand, not an ultimatum, an invitation to stop carrying guilt that never belonged to you. You were not meant to be perfect. You were meant to be present. Guilt keeps you facing backward. It ties your energy to moments that cannot be changed. It convinces you that the past still needs something from you. It does not. There are also relationships that once made sense because they were built on duty, on history, on expectations you never questioned because you were too busy being reliable. Some connections survive only because you keep them alive, because you feel responsible for their comfort, because walking away feels like failure. But not every ending is abandonment. Sometimes it is honesty. And honesty does not require anger. It simply requires clarity. You are allowed to step away from roles that no longer reflect who you are becoming. You are allowed to loosen ties that keep you small. You are allowed to choose peace without explaining yourself. Then there is the belief that suffering somehow makes you worthy, that if life becomes easier, something must be wrong. That joy has to be delayed to be legitimate. That belief kept you disciplined, but it also kept you guarded. You don't need to suffer to prove your value anymore. You don't need to struggle to justify your place. This season is not asking for another sacrifice. It is asking for trust. Trust that ease can coexist with integrity. Trust that receiving does not cancel out your strength. Trust that you are allowed to build a life that feels steady without feeling heavy. Letting go does not happen all at once. It happens in small moments of permission. Permission to rest without guilt. Permission to say no without fear. Permission to accept what comes without bracing for loss. If you feel resistance as you hear this, pause with it. Resistance often guards the doorway to something new. You are not being asked to become someone else. You are being asked to stop dragging old weight into a space that no longer requires it. As you begin to release what no longer fits, notice how your body responds, how your breath settles, how your thoughts slow. There is room opening around you now, quiet room, honest room, and in that space, something meaningful is already forming, not something that demands sacrifice, but something that meets you where you are and invites you to stay. There is a law that doesn't speak loudly, it doesn't warn, it doesn't explain itself while you're in the middle of the storm. It waits. You felt this law working long before you had words for it, in the moments when you lost something important and nothing came to replace it right away. Time slipped through your hands. Years went by where progress felt invisible. You wondered if you had fallen behind, or if life had simply moved on without you. People left, some quietly, some without closure, some in ways that changed how you trusted. Opportunities passed you by. Doors closed just as you were ready to step through. And you stood there, composed on the outside, asking yourself what more you could have done. What you didn't see then was that nothing was being wasted. Loss was not erasing you. It was clearing space. There is a precision to how the universe balances things. It does not return what you lost in the same shape. It returns it in a form that fits who you've become. Time that felt taken from you returns as authority, as credibility, as a presence that doesn't need to speak loudly to be respected. People who walked away made room for peace you didn't know you were missing. Peace that doesn't require explanation. Peace that stays when no one is watching. Opportunities that slipped through your fingers were not missed. They were misaligned. What is meant for you does not rush past you. It finds you when you are ready to hold it without fear. This is the moment when effort begins to shift into alignment. When you no longer have to push every door. When you stop running toward life and notice life adjusting its pace to meet you. You may feel it as a slowing down around you. Things lining up without forcing. Conversations opening naturally. Support appearing where there was once silence. This is not luck. This is response. The universe responds to who you are now. Not who you were when you were exhausted. Not who you were when you were proving yourself. You are no longer chasing validation. You are carrying clarity. And clarity has gravity. What belongs with you begins to gravitate closer. What is not aligned falls away without drama. You don't have to manage it anymore. There is relief in realizing that your job is no longer to chase outcomes. Your job is to remain steady while things come into focus around you. If you felt a subtle sense of being noticed lately, even in quiet ways, trust it. If you felt like conversations carry more weight, like your words land differently, that is not coincidence. You earned resonance through endurance, but endurance is no longer the currency. Presence is. And presence draws what effort never could. As this law continues to unfold in your life, you may begin to realize something important. The future you're stepping into does not require the same strategies that kept you afloat before. It asks for something simpler: awareness, trust, and the courage to let things come to you without questioning whether you deserve them. Stay right here with that feeling, because what begins to take shape next will show you exactly what all this space was made for. There is a version of you that no longer needs to brace for impact. You may still be getting used to that feeling. The absence of tension can feel strange after so many years of holding everything together. This version of you does not wake up asking how much more you can endure. It wakes up listening to your body, to your instincts, to the quiet confidence that no longer needs to explain itself. You are not surviving anymore. You are inhabiting your life. There is a difference. You no longer measure your worth by how much you can tolerate. You do not confuse strength with self-neglect. You understand now that real power is steady. It does not rush. It does not argue. It simply stands. You may notice that you speak less, but when you do, your words land. People hear you differently, not because you changed your tone, but because you are no longer asking to be understood. You know who you are. There is a calm authority in that knowing. It does not come from control. It comes from alignment. Your life begins to organize itself around what truly matters, not what impresses others, not what drains you slowly, but what sustains you. Stability becomes natural instead of forced. You choose consistency without sacrificing your soul. You build without burning yourself down. Prosperity starts to feel clean, not heavy, not anxious, not something you have to guard with fear. You trust yourself to manage what arrives. You trust yourself to say no when something does not fit. You trust yourself to rest without guilt. That trust changes everything. You are no longer trying to prove that you deserve good things. You simply allow them to stay, and they do. This new chapter is not loud. It does not announce itself with urgency. It unfolds with patience. You invest your energy where it grows. You step away from what only consumes. You move with intention instead of pressure. There is a long view now, a sense that you are building something that will last, not just for appearance, but for your peace. This is not a short season of luck. It is not a temporary break from hardship. It is the natural outcome of having completed a long cycle with integrity. You carried what you were meant to carry. You learned what you needed to learn. And now the weight has shifted. If you pause and check in with yourself, you may feel a quiet pride. Not the kind that needs validation, the kind that comes from knowing you did not quit on yourself. That matters. As you move forward, there is one truth you can return to whenever doubt tries to whisper. You are not starting over, you are continuing with wisdom. Everything you have lived through brought you here, to this steadiness, to this clarity, to this moment where your life finally feels like it belongs to you. So before the night carries us any further, let this land gently. Say it to yourself, out loud or quietly, with calm certainty. My new life begins now. And let that be enough to guide your next step, without hurry, without fear, and without looking back. As we come to the end of this moment together, I want you to notice something quietly powerful. You're still here, you're breathing, and somehow, you feel a little lighter than when you arrived. That matters. Not because everything is suddenly perfect, not because all answers have appeared, but because something inside you recognizes truth when it hears it. Capricorn, you didn't imagine this shift. You didn't talk yourself into hope. You remembered who you are, and that is always the beginning. The strongest changes never come with noise. They arrive like this, calm, grounded, certain. If this message met you at the right moment, leave a comment below and write, "My new life begins now." Not for me, for yourself. Because words spoken with intention anchor what's already moving. And if you feel that quiet resonance in your chest, that sense of being understood without having to explain, make sure you stay connected. Subscribe, not just for another video, but for the reminders your soul already responds to. This is not the end of the story. It's the place where the road finally opens. There are more messages coming, clearer ones, stronger ones, each arriving when you're ready to hear them. Until then, trust yourself. Trust the pace. Trust what's unfolding even if you can't see all of it yet. You've already done the hardest part. You stayed. And now, the journey continues.